Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. So, just to recap, I have to be very careful about what I say on this show, and I've had to be for several weeks now, but just to make it clear, Joe Biden was elected president of the United States November 3rd, 2020, and this election was confirmed by Congress on January 6th. Anyone who holds otherwise is a conspiracy theorist guilty of misinformation, and can't have that on the show, and we can't have that in the chat. So just so everyone is clear about that. So now, are we sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. I was talking yesterday about the rather extraordinary statement made last week by Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives. Again, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, this is from Associated Press, is accusing the Trump supporters who rioted in the Capitol this week of choosing their whiteness over democracy. Those last four words. Well, let's have the entire quotation. It has been an epiphany for the world to see that there are people in our country led by this president for the moment who have chosen their whiteness over democracy. I'd always figured that Nancy Pelosi was a white person, but perhaps she is herself engaged in the flight from Huwhyte. And statements made, well, the whole Biden campaign, and statements made by Pelosi and Biden himself after the election would suggest that a new class of Americans has been created or is in the process of being created. Racial kulaks, specifically white people. And Joe Biden, and I'll get to him in a minute, has made it pretty clear that he, well, a white man himself, regards them as second-class people. Now, of course, if Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden were that concerned about whiteness, white supremacy at all, they would, of course, have stepped aside quite some years ago to let a person of color or BIPOC or whatever we're calling them these days fill their slots. But they didn't. And that's the only test. The rest is just words. If you feel that strongly about it, actually, there is something that white people can do. They can just step aside and let others, betters, take over for them. This is from the National File and by Gabriel Keene. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden pledged to allot relief to small businesses on a racialized basis in a video posted to Twitter on Sunday, stating, quote, "Our priority will be Black, Latino, Asian, and Native American-owned small businesses, women-owned businesses," unquote. Yes, finally having equal access to resources needed to reopen and rebuild. Of course, the United States government has an enormous number of set-asides for these categories. These programs are rife with corruption, specifically seat fillers who are ostensibly in charge of the company, but are actually not. Biden said, "We're going to make a concerted effort to help small businesses in low-income communities in big cities, small towns, rural communities that have faced systemic barriers to relief." What exactly are those systemic barriers? As far as I can tell, he has not made this clear. Also from this story, a foreshadowing of the Biden administration's racially discriminatory viewpoints towards white men could be seen when the state of Michigan certified Biden's electoral college votes in December by demanding attendees rise for something called the Black National Anthem. Attendees were ordered to please remain standing for the national anthem and the Black National Anthem by the Turner sisters, Jaliyah and Jamila Turner. The official proceedings were then halted for a melancholy rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing, which was declared to be the Negro national anthem by the NAACP in 1919. The United States government does not recognize any Black national anthem, as the only federally recognized national anthem is the Star-Spangled Banner. However, that may change. Many things are changing, and very quickly. Now, this story, the next story by Catherine Smith in American Greatness, and it was covered, well, everywhere. Bit of a puzzler to me that Kamala Harris is on the cover of Vogue's February issue. And of course, she is wearing her Converse sneakers, which, as she declared during the campaign, the Chuck Taylors, they define us. Now, it's hard to imagine. I thought that, I don't know, Bill Clinton playing the saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show. Well, this is even more fatuous than that. How do Converse sneakers define anyone? Classic design, no question about it. But anyone who has the money, and it's not that much money, can buy a pair. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris is our February cover star, Vogue announced. Making history was the first step. Now, Kamala Harris has an even more monumental task to help heal a fractured America and lead it out of crisis. Big task, big task. According to independent journalist Yashar Ali, a source familiar with the publication plans told him that the photo of Harris with the pink and green backdrop is not the one her team and Vogue's team agreed upon. Harris's staff had agreed on a cover which features Harris in a powder blue suit, standing with her arms crossed and in front of deep buttercream color tones. Instead, Ali reported, Anna Wintour chose the cover of Harris in her sneakers for Vogue's print edition, while the cover allegedly the two groups mutually agreed upon will be featured online. People all over the place complaining bitterly about this. And there was a suggestion that it was rather like the famous, what was it, Time magazine cover of O.J. Simpson after his arrest, that his skin had been lightened. I don't. The level of paranoia, dread word, I know, that has become invested in anything to do with Black issues in the United States, well, is off the charts. From the Daily Mail. Anna Wintour defends Kamala Harris's Vogue cover, insisting magazine did not intend to diminish importance of the vice president-elect's victory, and denies claims that they formally agreed to use a specific photo. The VP-elect's Vogue cover sparked outrage when it was leaked online over the weekend, with social media users branding it lazy and disrespectful. Others claimed that the 56-year-old's skin had been lightened in the photo and questioned why she was photographed in a casual outfit and Converse sneakers. Well, again, this woman made it clear to the world that our Chuck Taylors define us. The controversy comes just 7 months after Wintour admitted to allowing hurtful and intolerant behavior during her time at Vogue. She also confessed that she has not done enough to champion Black staffers and designers in a mea culpa issued in a company-wide memo in June. The latest upset has reignited calls for Wintour's resignation. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. This is just an appalling insult. Absolutely appalling. Wintour said, when the two images arrived at Vogue, all of us felt very, very strongly that the less formal portrait of the vice president-elect really reflected the moment that we were living in which we are all in the midst, as we still are, of the most appalling pandemic that is taking lives by the minute. You might remember that after September 11th, 2001, it became a thing, apparently, and there were many jokes about this, appeared in many television shows, that bad behavior by people in America, and specifically in New York City, was excused that by people saying that they were still processing 9/11. So apparently Anna Wintour's editorial decision whether to present a formal or less formal portrait of Kamala Harris on the cover of Vogue has something to do with COVID-19. But I guess everything has something to do with COVID-19 now. Does it not? Head McNeck says, I'm professing misinformation in my head and you can't stop me. No, I can't, and neither would I want to. Neither would I want to. No, I'm not on the MTV payroll. I'm surprised that there's nothing to see there, actually. Hello to Gamma Buddy asks, are we ever going to find out who shot that lady in the neck, or will that remain classified? I would have thought that there would be an internal investigation at least, because from the pictures and the video I saw, that police officer essentially fired into a crowd with several police officers directly behind Ashley Babbitt. Anren says, shot in the neck, she tripped and fell on some broken glass left by racist whites that broke the windows at the Capitol. Well, we may get to that point. David Wright says, is the TV running in the background some sort of B-roll effect? Not sure if I'm using that term correctly. No, I don't really think so. Anren, what is Kevin's snack of choice while watching Gunsmoke reruns on MeTV? Actually, I don't watch Gunsmoke reruns on MeTV. I just keep the TV on because it's rather complicated selecting how to make it work if I turn it off. I generally watch the shows from the 50s and 60s, although Mannix comes on at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I usually can't watch that. It's far too late. But that show is just so completely nuts. And the fact that Joe Mannix has to punch someone in the mouth in every single episode is just too funny. Did KMG wear Chuck Taylors as a kid? No, I would have liked to. But I grew up wearing Czechoslovakian copies. Bought from a shoe store on Lonsdale Avenue in North Vancouver. Cecil Henry says the level of anti-white hostility to white interests and future from elites and their non-white imports is truly reaching Kulak levels of propaganda and danger. Some comment about Willie Brown here. Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to repeat that. Anren says, I watch MeTV and similar channels. I get so tired of that cleft lip kids commercial. Not familiar with that one. There are an awful lot of commercials for pharmaceuticals on MeTV. An awful lot. Hello to you, Adam, as well. I have a strange new respect for Bruce Willis. I will be getting to that. Oh, okay. It makes the show even more classy. Just keep it on black and white movies. Steve says, KMG is stream barely alive. Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology. We can make him better than before. Clearer, crisper, buffer free. Well, I hope this still maintains. David Wright says, total kills for the rifleman was over 200. Yes, a lot of shooting on that show. Chuck Connors, the guy who played the rifleman, this guy looks like he was carved out of wood. Man, they don't make male leads like that anymore. Doesn't Mannix flip someone every episode? Perhaps, but this show was developed by Bruce Geller, who was also responsible for Mission Impossible. And a great many of the shows of both series have to do with the Nazis coming back, that they're here. I remember one Mannix episode where he single-handedly stopped a fascist takeover of the United States. Too funny. Okay, as long as we're talking about old-timey TV, Pelpcasso88 says, The Fugitive is my favorite 60s show. It's a very unusual show because of it was a real downer. You know, this guy was on the run. David Kimball? He was on the run for years, and David Jansen, the actor who played him, I probably got the doctor's name wrong. He has this sweaty desperation in almost all of these shows, which is really not the sort of thing that one expected to see in mid-60s American TV. Yeah, the Gunsmoke guy. Yes, indeed. Chuck Connors was the brother of Peter Graves, his brother. Or no, was that Matt Dillon? I get them confused. And anyway, let's get back to the news here. Now, Biden's anti-white or anti-white male announcement, it's nothing new from the Democrats. You might remember this from January 2009. A top economic advisor to President Obama has told a congressional panel the billions of dollars in the proposed economic stimulus plan should be allocated with social issues in mind to make sure the money doesn't go to just white male construction workers or the highly skilled. Robert Reich, the tiny Robert Reich, who served as labor secretary under President Clinton, was speaking to the House Steering and Policy Committee about funding infrastructure projects across the nation. Quote, "It seems to me that infrastructure spending is a very important and good way of stimulating the economy. The challenge will be to do it quickly, to find projects that can be done that will have a high social return that can also be done with the greatest speed possible. I am concerned, because I'm sure many of you are, that these jobs not simply go to high-skilled people who are already professionals or to white male construction workers." I have nothing against white male construction workers, no. Reich, I'm sure, regularly has beers with them, and they eat pork rinds and such like. And they shoot the shit about the NFL, Major League Baseball. I'm just saying, he continued, there are a lot of other people who have needs as well. There are ways in which the money can be, criteria can be set so the money does go to others, the long-term unemployed, minorities, women. Representative Charles Rangel appeared to agree, suggesting federal money be directed to specific groups of people. The federal government, he said, must remove the discretion about where the funds go. Rangel noted that the middle class would be unlikely to create any opposition to funds directed to minorities, I suppose because they would be shouted down. Worse now than it was. But this war on white, or flight from white, this is not new. It's not new at all. Of course, it's very, very amusing to me to hear talk about white supremacy in countries where there is officially mandated discrimination against white males. Specifically, those countries would be Canada and the United States of America. But wait, here's a story from Jack Montgomery at Breitbart. A British police chief has lamented the fact that her leadership team is white, saying it is not okay that we look like we do. I'm reminded of a famous novel, speculative novel by L.P. Hartley from the 1960s called Facial Justice. Perhaps that's where we are headed. Chief Constable Olivia Pinckney said, if we look at the chief officer group of this constabulary, we are half female and have all sorts of other diverse characteristics. Yes, I wonder what that could be a reference to. Looking at pictures of Olivia Pinckney might give us a clue. But we are all white. Boo! I'm really aware of that, and so I'm doing what I can to mitigate in the short term, and I have a very detailed plan, which also national policing has as well, to try and shift that balance. It's not okay that we look like we do across UK policing, and I know my colleagues and I are all determined to shift that. Chief Constable Pinckney's remarks followed the dismissal of several officers from the Serious Organized Crime Unit on the force for making politically incorrect comments at work. Yes, shocking stuff. Pinckney said policing has never before been under so much appropriate scrutiny to ensure an inclusive environment for all our officers and staff to flourish and bring their best. I wonder what the percentage of police officers in the Hampshire constabulary is. Is it half? Is it more than half? There seem to be an awful lot of senior police officers in Hampshire who are female. Of course, if Olivia Pinckney and the other white females feel so strongly that it is not okay that we look like we do, they should resign and insist that their highly paid positions go to BIPOCs. But I wouldn't wait too long for that to happen. Another amusing story on this subject, somewhat tangential. This is from BizPac Review. A contributor to CNN was mocked online after he suggested that Fox News hosts and Republicans would have reacted differently to the U.S. Capitol building riot if it had been incited by, wait for it, the Reverend Al Sharpton. Imagine this scenario, Keith Boykin wrote on Twitter. Al Sharpton holds a rally and tells his supporters to take back their country with strength and combat. Then 5 people die after BLM activists stormed the U.S. Capitol. How would Fox News and congressional Republicans respond? Well, I think we have a pretty good idea what would happen, because we can look at the mostly peaceful Black Lives Matter protests across America in spring and summer of last year. And what did the police do as various cities were burned? They sat on their hands. That's what they did. Multiple Twitter users were quick to point out that, in fact, Sharpton had a leading role in causing deadly riots in the historic Jewish neighborhood of Crown Heights in New York City in August 1991. Yes, Al Sharpton, every year Al Sharpton holds some sort of political beano, and all major Democrats go and take the knee to him, notwithstanding the fact that this man fomented 2 actual-to-God pogroms in New York City. Yes. Destructive Governance responded to Keith Boykin. We'll take what is Freddy's Fashion Mart for $2,000. The experienced pharmacist said that already happened. Much of Crown Heights was burned. Reports from the period noted that Sharpton regularly incited violence against Jews using anti-Semitic language and blaming them for oppressing blacks. Just a few days before rioting began in the neighborhood, he reportedly said, if the Jews want to get it on, tell them to pin their yarmulkes back and come over to my house. Yeah, I guess different standards apply. If it is possible for people to change their sexuality, as it is, why is it not possible for people to change their race? It's a serious question, by the way. If Ellen Page can become Elliot Page and say that he was always a man, but had been misgendered at birth, and this is perfectly acceptable, why is it not acceptable for people who are who've been racialized, if you will, as white, identified as white from birth, to say that they have been misidentified their whole lives? Again, a serious question in that regard. This is from the New York Post, January 7th. Story by Elizabeth Elizalde. A prominent human rights attorney apparently posed as a Latina woman for years, despite claiming Puerto Rican and Colombian heritage for over a decade. Natasha Licia Ora Bannon is actually a white woman from Georgia. She serves as senior counsel at the Latino Justice Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund. Records obtained by the site say Bannon's family arrived in the United States from Ireland, Italy, and Russia. On Monday, Bannon, 43, claimed that she's white in response to the report. Quote, I am racially white and always have said that. However, my cultural identity was formed as a result of my family, both chosen and chosen for me. Oh, okay. when people are talking about their antecedents, who they descend from, they've all been chosen for you. You've got no choice in that whatsoever. She continued, my identity is the most authentic expression of who I am and how I pay honor to the people who have formed me. Since I was a child, Bannon also sent an email to Prism saying that she's previously identified as white, that her biological origins are Italian, atheist, Jewish, Sephardic. Is that a separate racious or religious type? Atheist, Jewish, Sephardic? Some unknown, adopted grandfather, and who knows what else. My biological parents were born in the United States, and I was raised with only one of them. Yet the Colombian family who I grew up with, and who were responsible in grand part for raising me, who helped form my character and identity, were from many different ethnic identities and backgrounds. You notice she doesn't say that she was in a foster home or that she was adopted. Were these people who lived across the street or down the block, or she went to school with one or more of their children? The controversy comes after actor Alec Baldwin's wife, Hilaria Baldwin, was accused of pretending to be Spanish and even faking her accent on national television. She later admitted on Instagram she's actually a white woman from Boston. Boo! Again, Spanish in North America, not the oppressed. They were the oppressors. They were the colonialists. They were the conquistadors. A couple of hundred of them, led by a man called Hernan Cortés, conquered the kingdom of Mexico. Pretty impressive, I must say. My response to this New York Post article was, are we supposed to be shocked by this entirely rational behavior? The more white people are demonized for being white, the greater the number of white people who will declare they are not white. And Chogokin 666 talking about the police, the BLM, peaceful protest. They kneeled. Adam says they didn't just sit on their hands. Many fell to their knees. Indeed, indeed. Hauper says, let Sharpton give the inaugural benediction. Yes, I'm going to be talking about the British police. John S. says, KMG, I'm thinking maybe more movie reviews and book discussions would lengthen your YouTube career. Sad to say. It's possible that you're quite right about that. Quite possible. Popcasso 88 says Robert Reich is filled with rage because he can't go on any rides at Disneyland. Okay. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, yes, Al Sharpton, Pat Buchanan was fired from MSNBC. You imagine a time when Pat Buchanan was on MSNBC because his recent book talking about demographic changes in the United States was deemed to be inexcusable. And who did they replace him with? The Reverend Al Sharpton. That story that I read didn't mention the What was her name? Tawanna Brawley, or Hoax, in which a black woman claimed to have been raped by a group of white police officers and then stripped naked and covered with excrement and left to die or whatever. And it turned out that she had made up the entire story, thereby ruining the lives of these white police officers. There was a monetary judgment issued against her, which she did not pay because she was not in a position to pay. And Al Sharpton, he was the megaphone for that story. Steve says, I knew that was her maid, says DB Cooper. Yes, good one. I like that. I knew a white Colombian girl who was incredibly racist towards other Latinos. She had a list. Yes, one hears of this sort of thing constantly. These Hispanics are an exceedingly diverse, to use the word in its proper sense, group of people. And for the most part, they really don't like each other much. But that is true, generally, of people around the world, all people. Now, how about the flight from heterosexual? It's a story from the Daily Mail. Only gay actors should play gay characters in film and television, critically acclaimed screenwriter Russell T. Davies has insisted. He said all the gay characters in his upcoming Channel 4 drama, It's a Sin, are played by gay actors because it's the only way to ensure an authentic portrayal. Authentic portrayal. Actors are not authentic by definition. The series follows the story of three gay 18-year-olds who arrive in London at 1981 at the beginning of the HIV epidemic. And its star-studded cast includes Ollie Alexander, Neil Patrick Harris, and Stephen Fry. Neil Patrick Harris, who is a gay man who for many years played a, how would I say, skirt-chasing heterosexual on a disgusting show called How I Met Your Mother. More on that later or soon. Davis, who was behind Doctor Who's 2005 revival, said directors must cast gay men to play gay male roles because you wouldn't black someone up in the modern day. He insisted he was not being woke about this and said the idea of acting gay is just a bunch of codes for a performance and is not authentic. Oh, I see. There is one mode of gayness. Is there? I was reading about the famous American lesbian author Rita Mae Brown, and she had a best-selling book called Ruby Fruit Jungle, which was about lesbians. And I noted that critics have been after her in recent years because apparently her dismissal of butch lesbian culture is considered to be, wait for it, heteronormative. Actor Alan Davis starred as a gay teacher in Davis's hit 2001 show Bob and Rose, while his 2018 miniseries A Very English Scandal featured Hugh Grant, who is straight, playing liberal politician Jeremy Thorpe. Okay. Let's get to it here. Okay. Again, actors. We have people playing all different kinds of roles because that's what actors do. So we should only have gay people playing gay characters. The BBC, another British television network, has become rather notorious in recent years for casting black people as, say, Margaret of Anjou, medieval princess, and a Georgian queen. Yes. There's no end to this kind of substitution. Vikings being played by black people. Shouldn't only white people play white roles? Over the years, I've seen many opera productions where you have black singers playing white roles. I have had no particular problem with this, as they certainly stand out. But if this is the rule now, then I'm afraid black opera singers will only be able to sing roles which are written for black people, which would pretty much reduce them to nothing. And again, if we are going to maintain reciprocity here, then Neil Patrick Harris, who, by the way, was ridiculously camp as a supposedly staunch heterosexual in How I Met Your Mother, then he's only going to be allowed to play gay roles. In fact, since Hollywood, or at least young Hollywood, is dominated by homosexuals pretending to be heterosexual, if we are to take Davis's lecture about authenticity seriously, then about half of Hollywood is out of work at a stroke. Again, I don't really have a problem with that. Yet, by all means, let's be authentic. Authentic is the most important thing. Authenticity is the most important thing in life. And clearly, it's the most important principle to Hollywood, which is all about reality and always has been. So I'm going to talk about American politics now. And again, remember, the proviso that it's all over, the election was entirely legitimate, etc., etc., etc. Drudge reports headlines, 180 hours left. Cheney, that would be Liz Cheney, yes, second generation neocon. She is for impeachment. McConnell wants Trump purged. More on that later. FBI warns new dangers. Extremists move to secret online channels to plot Inauguration Day mayhem. Secret online channels. You know, when QAnon talks about secret online channels, that's a conspiracy theory. Top military leaders condemn insurrection. Okay. That was a pretty short-lived insurrection, wasn't it? Order troops to follow the law. Prosecutors weighing sedition charges in Capitol riot. Trump may be shielded by Klan speech ruling. Dems briefed on plots to overthrow government. Assassination threats. There was an assassination attempt by a Bernie Sanders supporter on Representative Steve Scalise, and that disappeared down the memory hole pretty quickly. Didn't it? Okay. Oh, yeah. The purge, the self-purge has begun. That the right, let's call it the right, just to be simple here. They have to be cleaner than clean, whiter than white, as the old commercial has it. This is from Caleb Howe at Mediaite. Social media app Parler was removed from Google Play and Apple app stores. The company's email services and even legal services were discontinued, and at midnight last night, Amazon Web Services removed Parler entirely after a warning period, effectively shutting the company down. According to the company's CEO, that could last a while. The deplatforming of an entire platform has become an understandably big story in the wake of the violent and deadly riot in the United States Capitol last week. On the right, the story is about silencing of conservative views and the censorship by big tech. For the left, the media, and law enforcement, the story is rather about the organizing of criminal and malicious activity, the propagation of threats, and the transition from online messages to actual insurrection. If that seems like a big disconnect, it's probably because many of the people arguing that Parler was shut down for being conservative simply haven't looked too closely. It was actually in the letter sent from Amazon Web Services to Parler, notifying them of malicious content that the service was failing to moderate. BuzzFeed posted images of some of these messages. Conservative commentator Ellen Carmichael shared them on Twitter to emphasize the point. I could point out that Twitter, to give one example, is chock full of death threats against specific people, right-wing people, white people, conservative people, if you like, and whole classes of people. But I do not want to play the double standards game, but I just, media, they don't know about this, or they do know, they don't care, or they'll tell you that, no. See, that particular threat was taken out of context. Yes, the all-important context. And how do we know that it was taken out of context? Well, because the fact checkers have assured us of this. And the fact checkers are now, along with our medical bureaucrats, our high priests. So it would be sacrilege, no less, to object to what they have to say, and to suggest that the notion of fact, of truth, is a little more complicated than they make out. Well, let's go to Ellen Carmichael. And who is this woman? Conservative, apparently. President of the Lafayette Company, campaigns Capitol Hill and Louisiana State University alumna, Catholic American exceptionalist who loves France and Austria and the United Kingdom. And what is the Lafayette Company, by the way? What we do, it thrives at the intersection of the two worlds of communications and politics. We provide strategic guidance in public affairs, issue advocacy in political campaigns, smart brand and reputation management. She's a PR spiv, in other words. Now, in my country, Canada, the Conservative Party has been captured pretty much whole by PR spivs, and our political commentary is dominated by PR spivs. That is the worst situation possible, but perhaps this is coming to the United States as well. So she commented on a tweet from Tom Elliott from N. Hannah Jones, who, doesn't she call herself Ida Bay or some such thing? The white labor force votes against their own economic interests because it means they are still above Muslims, Latinos, and Black Americans. Ellen Carmichael commented, "It's really remarkable that professional people get away with saying these things. It's one thing to be a nutty weirdo on social media. It's another to get invited on major platforms and hold prestigious positions to spout what is genuinely racist garbage." Is it racist garbage? Because the President of the United States says that there are systemic barriers preventing Blacks, Latinos, Native Americans, and others from their rightful place in American business. So I think that Ellen Carmichael might actually be the racist here. I responded to her, "The solution, police your own side ever more ruthlessly so you can never be accused of hypocrisy, and you can comfort yourself with the fire of your own smug self-satisfaction, because that praxis has worked so well for the right in the past." That's, yes, civic nationalism. That is such an absolute winner for the right. That, as we can see in the last election, Joe Biden, it wasn't Thomas Edison who developed the light bulb. It was a Black man. Why isn't this taught in schools? And, I'm going to pick a Black woman or a female Black woman, one or two, mandatory. Why? Why? I thought it was supposed to be the content of your character and not the color of your skin. Ho, ho. Very specific. Very specific comedy there. It's all too funny that apparently there's good money to be made for people like Ellen Carmichael, who continue to advance a political praxis which results in, losing. Not only losing, but continuously apologizing. I don't know, how much money do you have to be paid in order to get over living the misery of a life where you're always on your knees? I guess we can, we can just watch these people and find out how much. Let's see, Edward Luttwak, who's a historian who I have an enormous amount of respect for, exceedingly intelligent man, insightful one too. I reviewed his book on an earlier book club, the reissue and newest edition of his fabled book, A Coup d'Etat. But he wrote some books in the 1990s and early 2000s, The End of the American Dream, and another one which he mentions in this tweet. In my book, Turbo Capitalism, I noted the acute economic insecurity of working people, managers included, who cannot benefit from the left's welfare because they are not poor, nor from the right's more change growth that threatens their jobs. Post-Trump, those voters remain. Again, Luttwak wrote an essay in commentary circa 1996. It was a symposium on, there were a lot of symposia in the old commentary on the future of America or some such thing. And Luttwak was talking about Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and his strictures against American conservatism. And Luttwak said that the Unabomber was completely correct. That a conservatism that extols choice as the highest virtue and economic efficiency is not going to be good for most people. It's certainly not going to be good for people who describe themselves as conservatives, because they're going to be told, oh, yeah, the gig economy, you didn't expect a career, did you? You didn't expect your employer to have any loyalty to you, Did you? Oh, yeah, we expect you to travel all over the country, uprooting your family. And by the way, do you really need families? Do people really need human connections? I mean, he was certainly prescient there, because if you want to, fast forward to 2020, 2021, we have America's leading churchmen saying, oh, masses, other religious ceremonies, we don't need that. You have a computer screen. You can just stare down and, experience this via Zoom. People, access to requirements. Tom Piatek tweets, I, for one, am grateful for all the Never Trump conservatives who have proven it is possible to unite on the basis of such lofty ideals as self-righteousness, vindictiveness, and unalloyed disdain for the great mass of ordinary American conservatives. Too true, although I wish that he'd stop using this word conservative, because the left has decided that conservatism means John McCain, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan. There is no way out of this. Call yourselves nationalists, call yourself patriots. Don't call yourself conservative, because then you are fighting on your enemy's turf under rules that they have drawn up, and rules that are constantly changing. This is a story from yesterday from Markets Insider. Twitter stock fell as much as 12% on Monday after the social media company permanently suspended President Donald Trump's account Friday evening. The share price decline wiped $5 billion from Twitter's market capitalization. Twitter bosses suspended Trump's account, which had about 88 million followers, after the world's leaders' fanning of conspiracy theories about voter fraud and election theft spurred thousands of his supporters to lay siege to the Capitol last week. There was a partial recovery of Twitter, I believe about 50% of what it had lost. But what Jim Cramer is musing about whether Twitter can survive the loss of Donald Trump. I guess they need another new show, big show. I see on Crazy Days and Nights, the speculation there is that Twitter is going to find a way to bring back Donald Trump, because they need him more than he needs Twitter. Well, we shall see. Paul Gottfried has a piece in American Greatness, Ashamed of What? People ask me if I feel ashamed about what Miranda Devine describes as the clueless insurrection of the Capitol Wednesday. My response, I am about as ashamed as Joe Biden, Senator Chuck Schumer, and Juan Williams of Fox News were about the riots and shootings that the Democratic Party subsidized and even justified last summer. Unlike those violent riots, which the Democrats and national media attributed to white racism and which came from Democratic voters, the turmoil in the Capitol on Wednesday did not result in burning and looting. There were no white or black policemen shot, and the only shooting victim, which the media doesn't seem to care about since white Republican lives don't matter, was a federal female protester, Air Force veteran Ashley Babbitt, by a Capitol Police officer. Now, it's now reported that 2 Washington police officers are dead as the result of the insurrection. One of them was a suicide, not on the scene, but some days later, which is being counted as an official insurrection death. Oh, okay. So does that mean that all of these people who have killed themselves since the COVID-19 lockdowns began, are they going to be counted as COVID deaths? Let's see. Gottfried continues, I also heard our Democratic constitutional expert on Fox News, Jonathan Turley, telling us Wednesday evening that pro-Trump thugs had lost their faith in our constitutional system. It was for this reason that they desecrated our sacred space. I don't recall similar talk about desecration when the peaceful protesters tried to burn down St. John's Episcopal Church across from the White House last summer. I also do not recall similar talk about desecration when Antifa mobs tried to storm the White House a few months ago. That has gone down the memory hole. Gottfried continues, I am not giving a stamp of approval to what occurred in the Capitol. On balance, the actions by pro-Trump forces were not particularly useful for our side, and the death of the lady veteran was nothing short of disastrous. But let's not pretend, like Rod Dreher, John Podhoretz, George Will, Eric Erickson, and most of the usual suspects, that Wednesday's occupation of the Capitol after a very impulsive speech by the president was a horrible black mark on the right. Well, that is going to be the battle about whether Trumpism must be expunged or defenestrated, one might say. And who wins that battle is going to determine not only the future of the Republican Party, but the future of America for some time to come. But when it comes to cucking, you simply can't beat Canadian conservatives. This is from Janice Dixon and Marika Walsh today. The federal conservatives decided to no longer engage with Rebel News hours after an emailed interview exchange between leader Erin O'Toole's staff and the far-right outlet was published. O'Toole's office participated in an interview with Rebel News on O'Toole's behalf. After it was published Monday, O'Toole's office said it would no longer respond to the controversial group and the leader would not do interviews with them either. The new policy revives one held by former conservative leader Andrew Scheer and is in step with other major political parties. In the summer of 2017, Scheer said he would not do any more interviews with Rebel until it changed its editorial direction. The tipping point was Rebel's sympathetic coverage of racist white nationalist protests in Charlottesville, Virginia. O'Toole did not have an interview with the Rebel and will not in the future. His press secretary, Chelsea Tucker, said in an email, she did not say why O'Toole's office agreed to the interview. You see, his staff cooked up answers to questions from the Rebel. This is a very standard practice in journalism, but everyone's playing the fact checker game. Well, actually, Erin O'Toole did not give an interview to the Rebel. And then we have a list of all of the good people in Canada who are not going to have anything to do with the Rebel. And as mentioned yesterday, the Rebel is run by Ezra Levant, a man who did decide to destroy my career some time ago and pretty much succeeded. But I certainly don't think that he should be made an unperson for his political views. One of the people vying for a Conservative nomination also did an interview with Rebel News in December. Ontario Progressive Conservative MPP Gila Martow, who is vying to represent Thornhill, north of Toronto, for the federal party, tweeted a video of her interview with the right-wing group. Martow did not respond to a request from the Globe. I should mention that Gila Martow is running against a PR spiv, a lesbian woman whose name I can't recall. And this is a very explicitly Jewish campaign. There are a significant number of Jewish voters in Thornhill, and the campaign seems to be about who is best suited to represent the Jewish interest in Canada. Okay, well, the Jews in Canada have a political interest, or Israel has a political interest in Canada, but of course, white people, and especially white men, are not allowed to have a political interest. No. It's all about, the content of character, not the color of skin or race or religion or anything like that. That would be wicked, except when, oppressed people do it. They will pull this off for as long as they can. And the solution is not to whine about double standards, but to win political power. The famous Swedish immigrant, the wobbly leader, Josef Hillström, better known as Joe Hill, he was executed. And before his death, he said, although some people claim that this is an apocryphal story, that his last words were, "Don't mourn, organize." And this would be my advice to the right. There's a piece here at American Greatness by Jay Wigg. And he concludes Democrats, with the help of many Republicans, appearing to be falling back on some kind of Gestapo, and I won't credit it with being directed humanely in the first instance. You're a Nazi. No, you're a Nazi. No, you're a Nazi. The Nazi Party was dissolved by force of arms in 1945, which was 76 years ago. Again, I don't really know how useful it is for people on the right to accuse their political enemies of being Nazis or fascists, because again, these terms are owned by the left. The fact that they know almost nothing about National Socialism or fascism, that doesn't make any difference at all. Because they control the narrative. They are the elite. They are the hegemons. And it is necessary for the right to create its own alternate elite. As I predicted back in 2015, that Trump was going to have terrible difficulties should he win the presidency, because there's no team there waiting on the benches to pick members from. And so he was forced to hire establishment figures, almost all of whom stabbed him in the back. A piece by Bob Maestros at Issues and Insights: ruling class Trump doubters still don't get it, and they'll pay a price. Pardon this commentator, while he expresses a hearty guffaw at expressions of the complete ruination of President Donald Trump in response to his supposed role in inciting the insurrection by his supporters at the Capitol. As horrifying and inexcusable a state of affairs as that was, and as seemingly effortlessly and painlessly linkable to the president's exhortation, one must ask, did opposing politicians and pundits, and even once friendly prognosticators and wobbly cabinet members, have their heads under the proverbial rock over the last 5 years? Were they not paying attention from the moment he descended from the golden escalator to disintegrate every rule of public and political decorum and conventional wisdom, with each handicapper on the face of the earth declaring he can't possibly survive this one? When he announced that Mexico was sending rapists, maintained a judge would be biased against him because of his Latino heritage, allegedly queried why we tolerate immigrants from shithole countries, outrageously suggested that the 4 female women U.S. representatives of color known as the Squad, 3 of them U.S. born, in a statement with overtones of the erstwhile racial epithet "ship them back to Africa," go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came. And yes, insisted a venerated political figure was not a war hero. I like people that weren't captured. Picked a high-profile fight with Muslim parents of a slain medal winner. Yes, I remember that at the Democratic Convention in 2016, where a man from Pakistan or some such held up a booklet and said, "Pleased to be reading the Constitution." Too funny. Too funny. The Rasmussen polling organization claims that Donald's approval rating has actually soared in the wake of the DC violence. Could be. Trump doubters are everywhere. Wake up, MAGA is more than a man. It is a movement. Codavia's country party that stands outside classic republicanism and has risen to protect and promote the neglected interests of Trump's forgotten Americans. This country party won't soon desert him, if ever. The members of the ruling class who are seizing the ostensible opportunity to bury this noble Caesar, not praise him as he leaves office, will eventually pay a bitter price. Well, from your lips to God's ear, as they say. Let's go back to the chat. Gottfried is great. Cotto is awful, says DB Cooper. He seems to have a particular animus, Cotto does, against Roman Catholics. Chokakin 666, I'm sick of that Sitting Bull looking idiot with the tattoos yelling. John S. says, KMG, time to set up a Telegram account, combo of Twitter and Skype. You can upload your show to it. Should the worst happen, Signal app too. Both are encrypted. Thank you for that. I once asked in chat for Cotto Gottfried to have KMG on, and Cotto said KMG did not respond. That's entirely possible. Since I lost since all my mail is internet-based now, and it's not based on my computer, I find I have a lot less control. I miss a lot of messages that I didn't miss before. I'll have to go back and see whether, in fact, I did get an invitation. If he says so, I'm sure it's true. Dan Allison says the Unabomber manifesto is stimulating. He makes plenty of good points, but I like having things like motorcycles and dentists. Well, no, I mean, the point that Ludwig was making is that conservatives are not conservative. Because if choice and efficiency are the highest values, you are not talking about a conservative movement. And since choice and efficiency are the highest conservative values and have been for decades now, it is time to ditch conservatism and stop calling yourself a conservative. Oh, black female Hitler. Actually, there is an episode of Community in which there is a black Hitler, and I wonder how long it will take before that episode of Community is also taken off Hulu. No, the reason there was a black Hitler in this episode is because John Goodman, who played the head of the dean of the air conditioning school at Greendale Community College, wanted Donald Glover to join this program. But it was kind of a secret society, so there was all sorts of anomalies in this room, including a black Hitler. So that is to say, if he explained what he had seen, no one would believe him. Only a frog can play Kermit the Frog. I have relatives who are POC passing, says DB Cooper. Would you like to be on with Cotto? Asks a Tricky Who. The last time I was on someone else's show, I had problems with my microphone. That is to say, you have to wear, earphones, and they run out of the microphone. If I can be assured that that works, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Okay, let's go Ontario. Yeah, I'll be getting to the madness in Ontario. Donald Trump was seen in public for the first time in several days today, and he was at San Antonio, Texas, at the Alamo, where he gave what has been described as a rambling speech. According to the authoritative Associated Press, Trump on Tuesday took no responsibility for his part in fomenting a violent insurrection at the U.S. Capitol last week, despite his comments encouraging supporters to march on the Capitol and praise for them while they were still carrying out their assault. People thought what I said was totally appropriate, Trump said. He made the comments during his first appearance in public since the Capitol siege, which came as lawmakers were tallying electoral college votes affirming President-elect Joe Biden's victory. Trump arrived in Texas Tuesday to trumpet his campaign against illegal immigration in an attempt to burnish his legacy with 8 weeks remaining in his term, as lawmakers in Congress appeared set to impeach him this week for the second time. Kind of running out of time for that. 9 days, less than 9 days left. Of course, it has to go through the Senate, but Mitch McConnell may be on board. In Alamo, Texas, a city in the Rio Grande Valley near the U.S.-Mexican border, the site of the 450-mile border wall his administration is building, Trump brushed off Democratic calls on his cabinet to declare him unfit from office and remove him from power using the 25th Amendment. Trump responded, "The 25th Amendment is of zero risk to me, but will come back to haunt Joe Biden and the Biden administration. As the expression goes, be careful of what you wish for." His use of the term Biden administration would appear to be the long sought for proof that Trump has in effect conceded, although he has not used that word. A week ago or so, he talked about ensuring a smooth transition to the next administration. He did not specify that it would be a Biden administration. It's time for peace and for calm, Trump said Tuesday, less than a week after egging on the mob that descended on the Capitol He added, respect for law enforcement is the foundation of the MAGA agenda. And apparently entirely his fault. What happened there? Notwithstanding the presence of people like this black fellow called Sullivan, leading BLM figure, who was trotted on by CNN right from the very beginning as if it were planned to explain what had happened. This is from Yahoo News. FBI warns of potential boogaloo violence during January the 17th rallies. According to an FBI document obtained by Yahoo News, the situational information report produced by the Minneapolis field office of the FBI is based on information provided by what it describes as collaborative sources. Sounds legit. The December 29th report warns that some followers indicated willingness to commit violence in support of their ideology, created contingency plans in the event violence occurred at the events, and identified law enforcement security measures and possible counter measures. Do they mention Whitmer in here, Governor Whitmer of Michigan? Yes. The anti-government militia members arrested in October for allegedly plotting to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer are also believed to have been tied for the Boogaloo movement. These were anarchists, actually, and I thought that anarchists were a good thing, but perhaps not. Perhaps not. Now, I'd heard of this Boogaloo movement, and it's obviously so ridiculous, and there's obviously so few people involved that I hadn't paid attention. But now that no less than the Federal Bureau of Investigation has identified it as a potentially deadly threat, I thought that I would, well, read the Wikipedia entry. The Boogaloo movement, whose adherents are often referred to as Boogaloo Boys or Boogaloo Boys, B-O-I-S, is a loosely organized, I bet it's loosely organized, far-right anti-government extremist political movement in the United States. The movement has also been described as a militia. Boogaloo adherents say they are preparing for or seek to incite a second American Civil War, which they call the Boogaloo. And apparently there are other forms of this name. Now, I wouldn't have dared to suggest it because I have participated in this meme myself, as so many others have. Specifically, the movie meme. The term Boogaloo alludes to the 1984 cult sequel film Breaking to Electric Boogaloo. Following the film's release, the phrase to Electric Boogaloo became a verbal template appended to a topic as a signal of pejorative parody. Breaking to Electric Boogaloo is not a cult film. No, it isn't. The only thing that is cult about that film is its ridiculous title. Again, according to Wiki, participants in the Boogaloo movement also use other similar-sounding derivations of the word, including boog, boogahajin, big igloo, blue igloo, and big luau, to avoid crackdowns and automated content flags imposed by social media sites to limit or ban Boogaloo-related content. We're almost at the level here of, what's he called? General Buck Naked? Oh, yes. And from the authoritative New York Times, Jonathan Martin and Maggie Haberman, Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the Republican leader, has told associates that he believes President Trump committed impeachable offenses and that he is pleased that Democrats are moving to impeach him, believing that it will make it easier to purge him from the party, according to people familiar with his thinking. The House is voting on Wednesday to formally charge Trump with inciting violence against the country. At the same time, Representative Kevin McCarthy of California, the minority leader and one of Trump's most steadfast allies in Congress, has asked other Republicans whether he should call on Trump to resign in the aftermath of the riot at the Capitol last week, according to 3 Republican officials briefed on the conversations. While McCarthy has said that he is personally opposed to impeachment, he and other party leaders have decided not to formally lobby Republicans to vote no. And an aide to McCarthy said he was open to a measure censuring Trump for his conduct. In private, McCarthy reached out to a leading House Democrat to see if the chamber would be willing to pursue a censure vote although Speaker Nancy Pelosi has ruled it out. It's a good rule of thumb that everything that the New York Times or the Washington Post says about Trump, his feelings, what people close to him are saying, is absolutely wrong and simply made up. Now, Mitch McConnell is no longer going to be Senate Majority Leader, and well, his wife has quit. Isn't it time that he moved on to K Street, or wrote his memoirs, or took on a role as a commentator on CNN? Mitch McConnell is the fellow who decided that no, $600 it's enough for Americans. $2,000, too much. Billions of dollars to foreign countries, no, that is absolutely necessary, but $2,000 for every American. This is your political genius, conservatives, Mitch McConnell. Let's have a round of applause, or perhaps a minute of silence for Mitch McConnell. Political genius. I mentioned the following yesterday. There's a larger version of it from Ryan Gerdusky at the American Conservative. Over the summer, John Weaver, the co-founder of the Never Trump Republican Lincoln Project, followed me on Twitter. It struck me as odd, given that my account was supportive of the president, but I thought little of it. Within a few hours, a young man I know over Twitter sent me a direct message asking if Weaver had contacted me privately and told me to be on my guard. This man, who will stay anonymous, told me that he was in communication with several young men solicited by Weaver for a job, after which he propositioned them for sex as part of the offer. He shared direct messages with me of both young men, one of whom had been strung along for days about a possible job, and when they met at his hotel, Weaver demanded they engage in sexual intercourse. They did. It was consensual, but Weaver never made good on the job offer. Another young man, who will also remain anonymous, spoke to me and a journalist to whom I passed the story along. In his messages with Weaver, this young man said that Weaver reached out to him with the promise of a job opportunity. He told Weaver would condescendingly call him my boy. Stories about Weaver along these lines aren't new. According to the New Republic, Karl Rove alleged that Weaver made passes at young men back in 2000. At the time, Rove and Weaver were competitors to be the dominant consultant in Texas. Their professional feud allowed any allegations to be dismissed as a smear campaign by Rove. Several other young men approached me throughout the summer with more allegations against Weaver. One young man, a junior in college, told me that Weaver would start direct messaging him on Twitter, saying he could offer him an internship in Austin, Texas, or Washington, D.C. The direct messages were persistent and led to them exchanging phone numbers and texting about the student's professional ambitions. Weaver ended up calling him after midnight during the student's finals week, claiming he was away from his wife on a work trip. According to the student, Weaver had been drinking but continued to ask about his studies and career ambitions. Weaver abruptly changed topics and asked if he played sports and was athletic. The Lincoln Project co-founder followed up by asking about his height and weight. At this point, the student became uncomfortable and said when asked about his build, he said he was about average. Weaver responded, "Oh, my boy, I'm sure certain parts of you are well above average." The student told him he needed to study and abruptly ended the conversation. The story goes on. Essentially, this fellow, John Weaver, is the Kevin Spacey of the Never Trumpers. And as of a couple of hours ago, there was no action being taken against him by the Lincoln Project. No mention of him stepping aside. Well, there was an investigation of any kind. Nothing at all like that. But I'm afraid I'm going to have to repeat what I said yesterday. That, the conservative movement, Conservatism Inc., as some people call it, is one of the bastions of gay political power in the United States of America. And so it seems that to criticize this would be homophobic, which would be problematic at best and deplorable and inexcusable at worst. the gays have their political party. It's called the Republican Party. And I don't know, maybe people who do not share that sexual proclivity might want their own party, or particularly their own political movement, which wouldn't be the conservative movement, which is as gay friendly, not to mention gay curious, as can be. Something about Sidney Powell here. Okay, I'm not going to repeat that. Gamian says, hope dies last. Sometimes it's best it dies sooner rather than later. My hope is still cruelly not dead. Well, this thought has been attributed to a number of people, particularly Antonio Gramsci, the political thinker from Italy, who came up with the praxis of the takeover of the institutions. He said, pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. Yes, that's the way to go. Tricky Who says, would you consider a call-in show sometime? Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'm planning technical advances to this program, but I think that they're going to need to depend on me finding a permanent abode. A call-in program, I would have to be ready to just punch that dump button all the time, would I not? I don't want to talk about a Dominion for obvious reasons. Vox Day appears to have thrown in the towel. Let's go to him today. He writes, I have to admit I have absolutely no idea what President Trump is attempting to accomplish here with this speech, rambling as he is about immigration and welfare and taxpayers and protecting American workers at this point. It's rather like Pompeo's speech yesterday, which completely and obviously ignored the herd of elephants in the rooms. Update, Michael Yon is reporting that it's all over but for the arrests. Quote, Insurrection Act has not been invoked, state of emergency invoked here in D.C. I've been with Rudy Giuliani past 2 days. I would know if Insurrection Act invoked, and so would you. Trump will leave office. Biden is in. This is a fact. I don't make the facts, but I do report them. I would not be surprised at all if Trump, Don Jr., and Rudy Giuliani are charged and arrested soon. I'm seeing many things that you are seeing. All of the above is true and more, unquote. Vox Day, well, he's still holding on. Tiny bit, at least. He concludes, perhaps or perhaps not. Remember what I've said about these not being ordinary times. Disinformation is the order of the day. And here are no points or cash prizes for being the first to surrender or despair. Well, I don't think anyone would hold it against Vox Day for surrendering or despairing at this point, 8 days from January the 20th, especially after Trump today explicitly referred to the problems that the Biden administration were going to have with the 25th Amendment. So, if Trump says it's over, then I guess it is over. This next may be the most Canadian crime story ever. It's from Adam Kovac and Kelly Gregg of CTV News. A Sherbrooke, that's a city in Quebec, husband and wife were handed sizable fines for violating curfew, despite the wife's protest that she was walking her dog and the fact the husband was wearing a leash. The woman and her husband were each given $1,500 fines by Sherbrooke police for violating curfew. The pair was caught walking at 9 p.m. on Saturday evening. Police said the two were walking towards downtown and did not cooperate with the officers. When questioned by police, the couple said they were happy to receive the ticket and claimed they were following the rules set forth by Premier François Legault. Quebec officials have said people may walk their dogs after the 8 p.m. curfew, provided they stay within 1 kilometer of their house. And perhaps they have one of those little click devices where they know exactly how far they've walked. Perhaps a siren or wail will go off if they exceed or are close to exceeding 1 kilometer. which is about 0.62 of an imperial mile, by the way. Over the first weekend under curfew, police officers across Quebec handed out 750 tickets worth thousands of dollars of fines to people caught out over 8 p.m. Oh, for some reason, there's related images in this Wednesday, March 29, 2017 file photo. A dog pulls on his leash during a walk in Waltham, Massachusetts. Note that the dog is a beagle, but despite the fact that it is a beagle, the dog is not wearing a mask. Unlike that dog I saw on View Street yesterday. And so Quebec went mad first. And seems like Boris Johnson is on the tipping point of going mad. But now Ontario is thrown itself over the cliff with Premier Doug Ford as the lead Gadarene swine. This is from the CBC. The Ontario government has announced a provincial stay-at-home order and new restrictions as new COVID-19 modeling revealed Tuesday shows that the healthcare system is on the verge of being overwhelmed. The province says it is issuing the stay-at-home order effective Thursday at 12:01 a.m., which will require everyone to remain at home, with exceptions for essential purposes like going to the grocery store or pharmacy, accessing healthcare services, for exercise, or for essential work. I should point out at this point something which has been noted by Berenson and lockdown skeptics and William Briggs and many others, is that during the flu season, every single winter, the healthcare system is on the verge of being overwhelmed. And you might want to ask yourself why this is. It's because jurisdictions do not want to have too much excess in their ICU capacity, because essentially they would be paying most of the year for beds to remain empty and for doctors to have nothing to do and Twitters to have nothing to do, nurses have nothing to do except make TikTok videos. Happens every single winter. Nevertheless, our province is in crisis, Premier Doug Ford said. The system is on the brink of collapse. It's on the brink of being overwhelmed. Doug Ford seems to have a personal interest in COVID-19. I don't know whether you've ever seen pictures of him, but as I've said previously, if he really is that worried about this respiratory virus, he would do well to lose about 100 pounds. Then he'd be in much better shape in every sense of the word. The province says it's enacting the following measures, which will come into effect between today and Thursday. Or outdoor organized public gatherings and social gatherings are further restricted to a limit of 5 people with limited exceptions. People are required to wear a mask or face covering in the indoor areas of businesses or organizations that are open. Wearing a mask or face covering is now recommended outdoors when you can't physically distance more than 2 meters. All non-essential retail stores, including hardware stores, alcohol retailers, and those offering curbside pickup or delivery, must open no earlier than 7 a.m. and close no later than 8 p.m. Non-essential retail stores, alcohol retailers. Well, judging by the many, many stories I've seen in this regard, apparently alcohol retailers have become essential retail stores because a great many people have decided to drink themselves into a stupor in order to escape the panic and the idiocy of the time in which we live. The restricted hours of operation do not apply to stores that primarily sell food. Non-essential construction is further restricted, including below-grade construction. There have been numerous lockdowns of varying severity in Ontario and its constituent parts. Going back to last spring, people in Toronto were forbidden to go to parks to watch the cherry blossoms bloom. Lockdowns don't work, but we're just going to keep locking people down until we all die of fright or cancer or heart disease or suicide, or cirrhosis of the liver, or fentanyl overdoses. Oh, let's see. Elliott, this would be the health minister, Christine Elliott, claimed Tuesday that the province was building that iron ring around the long-term care homes by the vaccinations we are doing. But Ontario officials have promised an iron ring around those homes long before vaccines were ever approved by Health Canada. Are these vaccines working, by the way? Because if so many people have got these vaccines, why are the number of cases continuing to go up? And again, what do we mean by a case, by the way? Projections show there could be about 500 COVID-19 patients in intensive care by mid-January, and potentially more than 1,000 by February under more severe conditions. Is that a lot? I ask that question seriously because Ontario is Canada's most populous province. And just to confirm its population, it is 14.7 million people. I would suggest that if a province of 14.7 million people cannot muster up 1,000 ICU beds, then they're not running their health care system very well. But no, it's all our fault, and it has always been our fault. Public health experts are also warning that a new, more easily transmissible variant of the virus first identified in the UK could begin spreading rapidly in the province, considerably extending the period of time it will take for case counts to drop significantly. 8 more people infected with the UK variant of the coronavirus in Ontario were identified yesterday. A total of 14 instances of the variant have been identified, but it's very likely that we have more than we're not aware of, said Dr. Barbara Yaffe, the province's Associate Chief Medical Officer of Health. 14 instances in a province of 14.7 million people. Well, I guess we have to panic even harder. Yaffe said the survey results and current trends indicate that lockdown measures implemented late last year were not enough. How much is enough? Do we have to weld people into their homes and have food supplies dropped through chimneys or pushed through windows? Perhaps, is that going to be the final stage? You know, if I'd said this, I have been saying this, making this joke for months now, probably going back to March. It's not that much of a joke now, is it? That apparently we can't let people go out at all. We're getting to that point. It is just too dangerous. See what William Briggs, statistician of the Stars, has to say. Well, 2020 UK in one photo. This is from David Scott at Albion_Rover. In one photo, there is a man who appears to me to be at least 80, and he is hunched, and he is very small, and he is being apprehended by 3, count up 3 policemen. He is holding his eco jute bag. Okay, very environmentally friendly. He does not appear to be wearing a mask, so I guess that's why it takes 3 policemen to deal with a clearly frail man who would appear to be in his 80s. Briggs comments, I said last week the UK has lost its mind. They have moved to madness level 11 since then, proposing allowing people outside only once per week and arresting now those walking alone along the beach. The scientists in charge of the UK are a word I cannot use on a family blog. They are also not too good at their jobs, which I can say and which I can prove with ease. The corona doom and lockdowns, with the 2 battling it out for the top body count, did indeed kill a lot of people in early 2020. The number of dead by whatever cause since then has been less than many, many, many other years. And then he proves this with graphs. The flu plus pneumonia seasons of both 1999 and 2000 were worse than the doom in 2020, where by worse, I mean worse. There is no justification for turning the screws on citizens, so why did they do it? Models. Models have taken the place of reality. I've been warning about this for many years. It's time you listen. Yeah, I don't know that people are going to listen until this burns itself out, perhaps much like the Salem witch trials burned themselves out, or other panics, more recent panic, the AIDS panic, the abducted children panic, the satanic mutilation of children panic. There's widespread sexual mutilation of children, both male and female, which is praised to the skies by our legislators, curiously enough. Giving puberty blockers, to 10, 11, 12-year-old girls, and then male hormones, and then maybe surgery. Yeah, apparently that mutilation is just fine because it's all about, gender inclusivity, which is the highest goal of our society now. Let's see how Briggs wraps this up. No matter what age, there is at least about a 10 times or larger charge of dying from something else than COVID. If you're under 44, the COVID risk is vanishingly low. Our level of fear is not in line with the actual risk. Well, no, it never has been. It never has been. We have known from the very beginning who was dying across North America. People in old age homes, people in their 80s. Those were the people who were dying. And what does that tell you about COVID-19? How long has this been known for? Well, it's been known for 10 months or more, but it makes no difference because one cannot reason with lunacy. Lunacy responds to something different. It responds to compulsion, really. That's what it responds to, not to reasoning. You can't talk a crazy person out of being crazy, and our society as a whole has gone crazy. And again, this will burn itself out eventually. When that will be, I don't know. Assuming I'm still alive in 5 years' time, am I going to be reading, commenting upon the 6th year of the lockdowns? At this point, I do not consider it to be impossible. Oh, let's all beat up. The cry bullies have all decided to assemble and beat up on Bruce Willis. The New York Post reported that Bruce Willis was asked to leave a pharmacy for wearing a mask. Kelly Turnbull, he's a funny cartoon writer with 29,000 followers on Twitter. The biggest badass in this story is whichever Rite Aid employee told Bruce Willis to F off. Daniel Kibblesmith, who has 96,000 followers, apparently he is a comedian of some sort as well. Die hard with a ventilator. Oh, so you disagree with this policy, so you deserve to die. This has been the constant refrain of the mask fanatics. That you don't do what we said, despite the fact there's no evidence that masks work, and that's what our experts told us at the beginning. And it's not as if masks were only recently controversial, as Alex Berenson pointed out a few months ago, that there was a arbitration in the province of Ontario just a few years ago about nurses in Ontario hospitals being forced to wear masks during influenza season. And the tribunal, which was comprised of experts, concluded that no, nurses would not be forced to wear masks because there was no evidence that masks were efficacious. Oh, here we go again. Bruce Willis's new movie, Die Hard with a Ventilator. Yes, Bruce Willis should die, apparently. Oh, John Squires, is this another comedian? No, he's the editor-in-chief of Be Disgusting, a sensitive person who likes bad horror movies. Turns out Alan Rickman was the hero and Bruce Willis was the villain. Miss you, Alan. You're a dick, Bruce. Alan Rickman was a murderer and a terrorist in the original Die Hard. So Bruce Willis is not wearing a mask. So that makes him worse than an actual murderer and a terrorist. Again, priorities. That's what it's all about. I see there's a few people standing up for Bruce Willis, but this has been very useful to Twitter. I suppose they don't have Donald Trump anymore, but they have all of these Karens, male and female, engaging in their cry bullying. And let's go to lockdown skeptics. Connor Chaplin talks about, and again, this picture of Matt Hancock at the lectern that says, "Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives." The fact that they were able to get away with that, I guess it was pretty easy after that. Let's see, 2.3 million people have been given at least one dose of a vaccine so far. And Britain intends to continue rolling out the biggest mass vaccination program in history. It's expected to take until spring to give a first dose to all 32 million people in the UK's priority groups, including everyone over 55 and those who are clinically vulnerable. As previously mentioned at this source, the government appealed for retired physicians and the like to take part in this vaccination program. And then it was discovered that a lot of people came forward and they were told, you're going to have to jump through various hoops, including demonstrating that you're sufficiently pro-diversity. And once again, I am not making this up. I was talking about a police chief constable in Britain. Here's another one. Metropolitan Police, that's London. Her name is Cressida Dick, and she is a lesbian dwarf. She has written in the Times, "It's preposterous to me that anyone could be unaware of our duty to do all we can to stop the spread of the virus. We have been clear that those who breach COVID-19 legislation are increasingly likely to face fines." According to the Times article, officers are now stopping people on the street and requiring them to explain why they are outside. Once again, neither Hitler nor Stalin would have dared to do that. They will also routinely hand out fines to anyone at illegal gatherings. Enforcement was previously limited to the organizers. Another force is using surveillance cameras to track down motorists breaching lockdown rules. Devon and Cornwall is deploying automatic number plate recognition technology to monitor vehicle movements. Despite the doom-laden tone from number 10 Downing Street, the ZOE COVID symptom study app calculated that the R rate in London was 0.9 as recently as January 7th, with infections falling. And there's a delightful picture here. And I don't know whether it was taken this way or it was cropped this way, but if you've ever seen The Thick of It, you'll know that Malcolm Tucker was adept in framing people he did not like, including people with his own party whose careers he wanted to damage, by putting them in front of words or parts of words, which suggested, subconsciously or otherwise, that you don't want to like this person. And here's Boris Johnson, who was the Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, wearing a suit and a helmet on a bicycle, and he's wearing a backpack because he's just so environmentally conscious, I suppose. Bicycling is rather dangerous, actually, but never mind that. But there is a truck to the left of him, and you can see in rather large letters the word barking, which is English slang for mad, as in barking mad. You know, like a rabid dog. The Prime Minister was accused of making a journey which wasn't in the spirit of the government's guidance after being spotted cycling 7 miles from Downing Street, the Evening Standard reports. The Prime Minister was wearing his TFL hat, I don't know what that means, and a face mask when he was seen cycling with his security detail in Stratford, East London at around 2 p.m. Official government guidance on exercise said it should be limited to once a day, and you should not travel outside your local area. The park has been noticeably busy with families exercising, and the PM is said to have been concerned by what he saw in the area. And the headline of one of the leading London tabloids, the Daily Star, has a picture of Boris Johnson as a clown with a bowler hat, big red nose, and blue mask, in a clown suit on a bicycle. Honk, honk, part 125. The government advice is crystal clear. Don't travel outside your local area. So why is Bozo out on his bike 7 miles from Downing Street? Apparently a British MP, David Warburton, member of Parliament for Somerton and Frome, is under serious attack because he voted against extension of lockdowns. Oh, and Andrew Cuomo seems to be coming around. I suppose this has nothing to do with Joe Biden becoming president in 8 days. Governor Death tweeted yesterday, "We simply cannot stay closed until the vaccine hits critical mass. The cost is too high. We will have nothing left to open. We must reopen the economy, but we must do it smartly and safely." Didn't he mean to say build back better? Yeah. Was I just witness to a COVID death from lockdown skeptics? And it's about a man that they knew, 60 years old, but quite well fit, who committed suicide. And this happened in Connecticut, in the United States. And apparently this fellow simply couldn't hack it anymore. The lockdown, the fear, the hysteria. We are told that suicides, even amongst young people, have shot up enormously. But what the bureaucrats are going to say. They will say, oh, suicides would probably be 5 or 10 times as high if it weren't for our lockdowns and our masking and our social distancing. And I went into a vitamin shop yesterday in Victoria, and I had my mask on, and some guy comes running up to me and said, "You have to use the hand sanitizer, the hand sanitizer." I had never been told that I was forced to use hand sanitizer before. So I turned around and started walking out. And the man said, no, it's over there. It's over there. And I walked right out the door, down the street, and found another place to buy my vitamins. I mean, there is a limit, even for me. Let's see what Alex Berenson has to say. I'm particularly interested in this question of the safety and efficacy of the vaccine, because, of course, the media is taking the position that, of course, it's safe and efficacious. But where is the evidence that it is? Oh, yes, I have noticed this. I've noticed this with Mitt Romney in particular. Attention citizens, your Department of Pandemia announces all citizens are immediately required to wear at least 2 masks at once, plus one on the back of your neck, just to be sure. A 4th is recommended, but not mandatory. A 5th shows how much you care. Attention citizens. This is from the New York Times. 1 mask is good. Would 2 be better? Health experts double down on their advice for slowing down the spread of the coronavirus. I have mentioned previously the number of times I was told by people during the AIDS hysteria that apparently men were using 2 condoms instead of 1. And my reaction was, why are they even bothering then? Berenson, responds to a tweet from Nadav Eyal, an Israeli. An exclusive and initial analysis by Israel's largest healthcare provider, Clalit, shows a 33% drop in COVID-19 infections 14 days after first dose. Pfizer phase 3 trial checked for symptomatic disease only. This analysis was done on over 200,000 people over the age of 60. Berenson comments, this only matters if they compared the drop to what happened to people who haven't been vaccinated. If they did and the reduction holds, it's a good start. Well, you need a control group, right? Isn't that what science teaches us? Jordan Schachtel tweeted, both vaccinated residents and vaccinated staff tested positive in huge numbers. Could be a PCR issue, could be something else. Definitely worth monitoring what's going on here. And this is a response to what Berenson had tweeted. The real-world evidence seems clear. A single dose of the Pfizer vaccine won't protect the elderly who have weaker immune responses. At a single nursing home, a 90-year-old died of COVID 18 days after receiving the vaccine. Many others were infected. And it's not just in Montreal. A home in Auburn, New York, upstate, having a huge outbreak. Readers have reported others to me, though I have not yet confirmed them. Look, SARS-CoV-2 is widespread and the vaccines don't protect immediately, so there is room for coincidence here. Yes, again, apparently this is the argument from assertion that these viruses are both safe and efficacious. Aren't we supposed to rely on empirical evidence? Those were the old days. We don't need empirical evidence. We just need drug companies and health bureaucrats and their lapdog political masters saying, well, of course they're safe and efficacious. Would we release vaccines that were not safe and efficacious? Let's see, the final from Alex Berenson. How can any public health authority justify changing the vaccine schedule and holding back on the second dose, especially for the elderly, who are the only people who clearly need the vaccine, given what we are now seeing in these nursing homes? But the problem is even more fundamental. We do not have the data to prove the vaccine works in elderly people because we didn't test it in enough of them. They have fewer adverse events, which suggests a weaker immune systems to the LNPs, to the spike proteins, to both. And we have already seen data suggesting older people do not have as strong or durable response, and their antibody levels drop fairly quickly. So everything is a guess. This is what happens when you go warp speed. Everything is fine until it isn't. And I thought that I'd wrap up today with something cultural. It was suggested earlier I might do more of this. But this was sent to me by someone who follows me on Twitter. He sends me a lot of very useful things. I won't mention his name, that I use on the show. And I found this article fascinating. New book, this is from the Jerusalem Post. New book seeks justice for unfairly sullied Jewish composer. A victim of Richard Wagner, will Giacomo Meyerbeer finally get his due? Who was Giacomo Meyerbeer? And this article is by Sandra Lee Browd. Who was Meyerbeer and how did it come about that he was deliberately forgotten? I'm going to take issue with this. Things are not that simple in terms of a popularity or a critical approbation. They never are. The story continues. Meyerbeer was born in 1791 while his mother was riding in a carriage on his way from Berlin to Frankfurt. His birth name was Liebman Meyerbeer, but most people simply refer to him as Meyer. Both parents came from wealthy and prestigious families. The home was indisputably Jewish to the extent that his father established a private synagogue there. His mother conducted a salon, which was attended by the social elite. She was awarded a medal for her charitable activities during the Franco-Prussian Wars. Meyerbeer led a privileged childhood and received the finest education, both musical and cultural. From early on, he exhibited musical prowess, and the composer Clementi is said to have pronounced him a genius, possibly even a second Mozart. At the same time, his Jewish studies continued. In 1810, he was sent to the German city of Darmstadt to continue his musical studies and wrote his first composition. A year later, he joined his two names into one and adopted his father's first name. From that point, he would be known as Jacob Meyerbeer. He was called Jacques in France and Giacomo in Italy. He became friendly with the great Italian composer Rossini, who spent he spent most of his life in Paris. Paris was the musical capital of the world at the time, and I'll have more on that in just a minute. So Meyerbeer was the most successful opera composer. Well, I suppose a rival with Rossini. They were the two most successful opera composers of the first half of the 19th century. The Jerusalem Post article continues. While still in his 20s, Richard Wagner saw fit to compliment Meyerbeer in an article printed in the Gazette Musicale in Paris, writing that, quote, "The German more than any other possesses the power to go to another country, develop his art to the highest peak, and raise it to the plane of universal validity. Handel and Gluck abundantly proved this in our own time. Another German, Meyerbeer, has proved a fresh example," unquote. However, Wagner also wrote prose essays, the most virulent being Das Judentum in der Musik, Jewishness in Music, which was published in 1850 and caused much controversy because of its overt anti-Semitism. In it, he attempted to explain scientifically that the repulsion felt toward the Jews is a perfectly natural feeling and should not be suppressed, that the root cause of this repulsion prevents the Jew from being capable of creating any true art, etc., etc. As a result of Wagner's vicious anti-Semitism, Meyerbeer's reputation was destroyed, and he has, in a sense, been the deliberately forgotten composer. No. However, times and history change, and Richard Wagner's great-grandson, Gottfried Wagner, has debated the way in which to confront Richard Wagner beyond glorification and condemnation. Professor Emeritus David Feynman, a theoretical physicist and specialist in applied solar energy, has applied his research acumen in his eminently scholarly and readable book. In doing so, he's brought this forgotten composer back into the public domain. He's not exactly forgotten and never was forgotten. Meyerbeer was stupendously rich, which caused a great deal of envy amongst his rivals. For instance, putting up stupendous amount of money to have one of his operas performed at the Paris Opera. Hector Berlioz was rather put out about this because he was a poor man for most of his life. But the question of why a composer or writer or any artist who was beloved at one point and the critics sang the praises of, and then less so in the future, it's a complicated one. Richard Wagner hated Meyerbeer for three reasons. One, he was a Jew. Two, he was rich and adored. Three, his music demonstrated no advance from Beethoven. There was also tremendous resentment of the premier position of the Paris, its conservatory and opera, especially as France was lacking in great composers at the time. It was a given among the most influential of 19th century composers that all music must be reconsidered in the wake of Beethoven. Composers such as Meyerbeer were seen by 1890 or so as outmoded and even corny. But keep in mind that J.S. Bach was ignored from before his death and until the 1930s, when his music was rediscovered by Schumann and Mendelssohn. Until then, Bach was seen as excessively severe and academic, a dead end. Similarly, Mendelssohn's oratorios were the most popular music of Victorian England. Circa 1900 and onward, they too were seen as corny. People pass, times change, and the classical music world once sought novelty with a passion. It is only, let's say, since the end of the Second World War that classical music has become a museum. The main reason for that is the academic takeover of classical music by the academies, by the universities, and the baleful influence of Anton von Webern and serialism. That Schoenberg, the inventor of the 12-tone system, said that there was still plenty of good music to be written in the key of C major, but it became the law after 1945, the year of Webern's death. He was shot to death accidentally in Vienna by a drunken American soldier. That no, serialism was the only form of music, and such was the power of the serialists that even Stravinsky bent to their will, and many others. And I guess it was only the minimalists, led by Stieg Reich and Philip Glass, who managed to pull classical or serious music out of that pit. But by then, the damage had been done. There's every piece that was written by Bach has been recorded. Every piece written, by his sons? Certainly all the piano music of CPE Bach has been recorded in recent years. This would have been unthinkable, again, until after the Second World War, because there was still new music being written that people were interested in hearing. And after 1945, well, you had Stravinsky and you had Richard Strauss, and there were a few others, but of course they died because they were old. And you used to hear this term in classical music, new music. And essentially, new music was a euphemism for music that no one wants to hear. And no one wants to pay for. No one wants to publish. But this was the new music, and it was going to be shoved down our throats until we learned to love it. But that never happened. Not even close. So I say all this just to explain that a composer as great as J.S. Bach was considered old hat and all these fugues and canons. Why would anyone be interested in that? The later, classical style of Haydn and Mozart was supplanted by the Romantic style, and Mozart and certainly Haydn to a greater extent were considered minor composers until the 20th century. Most of Haydn's symphonies and string quartets remained unrecorded until quite late in the day. Now, they've all been recorded many times now. Reason for that is that if nothing new is good, people are going to go back to what is old. Now, interestingly, Franz Liszt, who was the leader of the new music movement and Wagner's mentor, although Wagner was ungracious enough not to acknowledge him as his mentor until near the end of his life, he thought the world of Giacomo Meyerbeer. He had good reason to be grateful to him because his arrangement of Reminiscences du Robert de Le Diable for piano was his showstopper for decades. Liszt also made a famous transcription for organ of themes from Meyerbeer's Le Prophète, fantasy and fugue on the chorale Ad nos ad salutarum undam. It was dedicated to Meyerbeer, and the dedicee was delighted with it and proud that Liszt had honored him. Later, Ferruccio Busoni made a famous arrangement for single piano. Again, Beethoven was thought to be ground zero. And so music had to advance tonally. And music that was not seen to advance tonally was music that should be forgotten. Such was the feeling amongst the vanguard. But of course, there was a great falling out among those who took Beethoven as their ideal. On the one hand, you had Schumann and Mendelssohn and Brahms and Joachim and others who later were castigated as conservatives and reactionaries, ironically enough. And on the other hand, you have Liszt and Wagner and Hugo Wolf and Bruckner and others. But if you look at the music that was most popular in the 19th century, particularly the late 19th century, you'll find that most of it has been completely forgotten, and it has nothing to do with any racial or religious reasons. In any event, Wagner insisted that his operas at Bayreuth be conducted by a Hermann Levy, a Jewish conductor. I don't know that many people have read Wagner's strictures on Jewish music. I mean, they serve only to denigrate his legacy. He was his wife, Cosima, Liszt's daughter, who was she hated Jews with a passion. But of course, Hermann Levy continued to conduct at Bayreuth after Wagner was dead, after her husband was dead. Amusingly, there was a huge Wagner cult amongst Jewish musicians. in the late 19th century. I read this in what the biography of Mahler was by Henri de Lagrange. Am I getting that right? Name right? That the Jewish students in Vienna, including Mahler, they would become obsessed with Wagner and say that, all men must be vegetarians because Wagner said so, or all men must have beards because Wagner said so. So that's my little diversion on Meyerbeer. Just a too long didn't read version of that is that it is needlessly reductive to blame the eclipse of Meyerbeer's popularity on the opposition of Wagner or on anti-Semitism. Many of the leading classical music figures of the 20th century and beyond have been Jewish. Being a Jewish composer does not seem to have really be much of a disadvantage. So let's have a final look at the chat here. Shostakovich lived into the 70s. Yes, indeed. Now it's all closed down anyway, says Gaia Yun. Yes, indeed. Chad Chadson, our valiant moderator, and thank you, Chad, says, I was just informed that I can no longer give blood until I get the vaccine. Well, no more free cookies and orange juice for me. Halper says KMG could do a music segment as he does with films and books. I suppose I could. It wouldn't be very technical, I'm afraid. It'd be more historical than anything else. Liberals should be feeling okay, though. Gay and merry in the time of cholera, says Gamian. They don't seem to be very happy, though, do they? The existence of 75 million Trump voters it's unbearable to them. And this is why I believe they think that Trump needs to be impeached again. It's not going to make any difference to people. I mean, Nixon was impeached. It didn't go, or the process started, and then he resigned. Andrew Johnson was impeached. Trump was impeached. Oh, but Trump is the first president to be impeached twice. I don't think that's going to make any difference to people. They're just enraged because there is a force in America which they do not control and which is opposed to their aims. And they would have thought that that would be all over. When Trump became president, immediately the howling began. I mean, how dare this happen? Oh, he's a puppet of Putin, so he has to resign. He has to be forced out. There were sealed indictments, and none of it worked. And of course, when the indictment for the impeachment actually came, it had nothing about Russia in it. Manhattan is a ghost town, says Media Hits. Well, I'm not surprised. Okay. Let's wrap this up now. I'm going to be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And coming up on Theater Thursday this week is Andrei Tarkovsky's science fiction film of 1972, Solaris. And coming up on the book club on Friday is Hermione Lee's biography of Tom Stoppard, which is exceedingly well written, I must say. If you like the show or any part of it, I would appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to make a donation to this stream, which I could really use at this point, my PayPal account is associated with Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can make a donation directly via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you with my traditional benediction. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to find a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.